ACI Virtual Edge Step-by-Step Install. Let's move on to Section 2 now. In Section 1, we did an overview of AVE and we installed the ACI plugin in vCenter, and we used a CentOS VM to install that plugin. In the first module of Section 2, we are going to set up the basic VMM domain. So we are going to quickly set up the access policies, and then we'll set up the base DVS switch by setting up the VMM domain. We first have to set up the access policies on ACI. Let's look at the diagram to make sure that we know what to do. So there are two hypervisors in this case. One on the left-hand side is 10.29.198.25 and the other side is 10.29.198.26. They are single-homed to leaves. Those are the top of racks in this case. This is a lab, so we are just doing single-homed. In a real-life situation, you would do VPC from both the leaves. The leaves over here are leaf 303 and leaf 304. Both of those have Ethernet 123 that goes to the hypervisors. We have logged on to the ACI APIC UI. Let's go to Fabric and let's go to Fabric Access Policies, and over here the first thing we'll do is we are going to go ahead and create some VLAN pools that we are going to use for this AVE. So let's go and create a VLAN pool, and we'll call this this is the situation. This lab is used by a lot of people, so there might be VLAN overlap. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do everything port local. That way, if there is an overlap, it would not matter. So I'm just going to call it SM for my initials, Sumitra, and then I'll say port local fx underscore AVE dash VLAN pool, and it's going to be dynamic allocation. Now I'm going to do over here VLAN 100 to VLAN 199. Remember what we had said, that you could do, even on the AVE, you can do VLANs as well as VXLAN. So the times you would want to do VLAN is when you want to bypass the AVE and go directly for storage reasons or for any other reasons. So that is for this. So we are going to put the pool of 100 to 199 over there. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK, and it's inherit allocation mode from parent, and parent is dynamic, so this will be dynamic. So I'll say OK. All right, let's go ahead and add a static pool. So we are going to do a static pool inside this parent dynamic pool, and I'm going to say 50 to VLAN, let's say 55, and I'm going to make this static. So the reason for this is basically at times, even on a dynamic VMM domain, you might want to do static allocations. Let's say that you have a vCenter connected to a port group, something of that sort. In this particular case, we are going to do it because we want to have vMotion, and we need to create a vMotion VM kernel on the two hypervisors. So that's why we are doing that. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK. And then next, I'm going to go ahead and create the PVLANs. Remember, on AVE, we have private VLANs on the ports. So this is going to be for that. So I'm going to say 200 to 299. And in this particular case, I'm going to say, of course, that's going to be dynamic, inherit. And then I'm going to say internal. Internal means private VLANs. So I'm going to say OK, and then submit. So basically did it for my VLAN pools. Now let's go ahead and create the AEP. I'm going to go ahead and close this, and I'm going to go ahead and open policies, and then I'll go to global, and in global I'll go to attachable access entity policies, and over here let me make an AEP, and I'm going to call it SM port local and then fx underscore underscore AVE underscore AEP or dash AEP. And it's very important here to enable the infra VLAN. The reason is that you have to pass the infra VLAN for the VTAP to go ahead and get established on the AVE and to create that VXLAN tunnel from the top of rack leaf. The infra VLAN in this case that setup is 3967, which generally is the best practice because that does not conflict with any of the reserved ranges of VLANs on other switches. I then go ahead and say next and finish, and that's done with that. Now let's go ahead and minimize that, and now what we want to do is create the interface policies. So I'm going to open up interface, leaf interfaces. Let's create the policy group first. So this is going to be leaf access port because these are access ports. They are not VPCs or anything like that. Remember from the diagram. So I'm going to go ahead and create leaf access port policy, and I'm going to call this SM port local fx AVE, and link local over here. Those ports on the hypervisors are 1 gig in this case, so 1 gig auto on, and these policies were already created before. The 1 gig auto on, that's day 0 setup on ACI Fabric, and everybody should know how to do that. So CDP I'm going to enable, and LLDP I'm going to enable over here. Again, those are policies that were already set up. I'm going to go ahead and let those go for now. And then for the AEP, I'm going to go ahead and choose something, choose the one that I made, which was this SM port local FX AEP, AVE AEP. So I'm going to say submit, and that's done. Now let's go ahead and minimize that, and let's go to profiles. On profiles, I have these set up already over here. Now this is the best practice. What you do generally on day 0 is you set up the switch policies like this, and for every switch you set one up, and every pair of switches you set one up, and then you duplicate them over there. For instance, leaf 303, 304, you will see that leaf 303, 304 has the associated policy, selector policies for 303, 304, which is this one over here. So that way, I don't have to go create things over here and then go and associate them to the switch policies. I can pretty much keep the switch policies closed, and if I put in anything over here, they automatically get associated with the parent object, which is the switches that this shows over here. So 301, not 301, 302, but 303, 304 over here. So if you notice, 303 and 304 has stuff, but 303, I could individually go and put it on 303 and 304, but since those are both 123, I'll go ahead and put it over here. So basically, I'll go here and I'll say, let's make a policy for SM FX AVE, and then over there I'm going to put, let me also put dash PL just to be consistent, dash PL dash FXAVE, and then the interface ID is 1/23, and the interface policy group is going to be the one that I just created, which is SM port local. Let's see, it's somewhere over here, and this is it, SM port local FXAVE, and that should do it. One more thing that I almost forgot on the access policies is that I said I want to make it port local, and I named it port local, but I did not make it port local. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go to policies, and let's go to switch policies over here, and then no, not switch policies, interface policies, and then let's go to L2 interface, and let's create a L2 interface policy and call it port local. So let's call this SMFX AVE port local AVE underscore port local and L2 policy. Long name over there. I don't generally like to put the name so long, but let's leave it at that for now. And what we are going to do is VLAN scope is port local over here, and say submit. And then now let's go back to our interfaces and look at the interface that we made, the interface policy group. And then the interface policy group was SM port local FXAVE. So let's go over there, and on the L2 interface, so this is the one that we configured on the L2 interface. Let's go ahead and tie that in. So port local SMFX AVE, did I call it port local FX AVE? Let me see. Yeah, I guess I did. So port local FX AVE, submit changes. Okay, so that's done. And then the other thing is that let's go ahead and create a pool for multicast addresses. So multicast address pool, and you could do this actually directly when you're making the VMM domain. You could do that too, but AVE requires a multicast range of addresses, because remember it's VXLAN. So create multicast address pool, and we'll call this SM FX AVE MCAST pool. Each multicast address, or each EPG, will use one multicast address from the pool. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a range that others are not using. So 228.1.1.1 to 228.255.255.255, and say OK, SMFX AVE multicast pool, and I'll say submit. Next, let's go ahead and go to virtual networking and start creating the VMM domain for AVE. So I'll go to VMware, and I'm going to create a vCenter domain, and I'm going to call it SMFX AVE. That's going to be the name of the DVS, or of the DVS switch that you will see over there. And this is Cisco AVE, and I'm going to do local switching and VXLAN mode, and the AEP we have to select over here, and the AEP is going to be the one that we created. So it starts with SM, so it's SM port local FX AEP, that one. I'm going to leave the delimiter to the default one, but there are others you can use, and sometimes people use it because Some people, they do some sort of scripting, and their scripting doesn't like the default uh, character, the uh, vertical bar, so they change it, but I'll just keep it over there. The VLAN pool, we are going to choose the one that we created, which is this one, SMPL-FX-AVE. Again, you might ask, why do we need a VLAN pool? So remember, this VLAN pool has the VLANs for the private VLAN pair, primary, secondary VLAN. It also has the VLAN for the static bindings that we might need. And if you were going to do bypass and not go to AVE but go directly to the DVS, then you would use that. And then the multicast address over here, we will use 224.2.2.3. So this is fabric wide for this particular AVE, and you just need to make sure that other AVEs, if they are set up other domains, then they have a different pool. So this is just one address, not a pool, just one address for the entire VMM domain over here. And then the pool, this is the one per EPG, and then we did what did we name it? SMFX AVE multicast pool. So that's the one. We don't care about security domain. Let's go ahead and create the vCenter credentials. So I call this VC cred, and the vCenter is 225. I have many different vCenters here, so that kind of helps me know which one it is. Administrator at vsphere.local. Again, if you don't have the admin password, which is normally what happens on the customer side, you can look up CCO and it will tell you what privileges you need from vCenter to be able to do that. And then you need to create a user with those privileges, or ask the vCenter guy, who probably won't let you create users, to create it and give you the username and password for that. I put in the password and I have to confirm the password. Done. Let me say OK, and let me say submit. Now let's go ahead and open that up, and let's go to SMFX-AVE. That's the one we created. You can see that there are some faults. Always make sure that you are looking at faults as you go. If there is a fault that pops up, you need to first resolve the fault before you move forward, or you should be able to explain it because you know there is a reason and you don't care about it. In this particular case, you can see that they are all temporary faults. These are already retaining, and these are soaking clearing, so they'll go into retaining at some time. I'm just going to go ahead and acknowledge them all, so the retaining should go away, and it should go away. I guess, there you go. It's gone. The rest of the faults should go away in a little bit of time. It's soaking clearing state. All right, let's open this up and let's look at controllers. I forgot something. In a hurry, I forgot to put the vCenter. I forgot to actually put the vCenter information over here. So let's go ahead and do that. I can still do it now. So vCenter. So the name is vCenter 225 and 10.29.198.225. And the data center name has to match exactly. So this is the vCenter. Let's go to host and clusters, and it's called FX. So let's go over there and call it FX. This has to match exactly. and the associated credentials should be vCenter225. So let's go and submit that again, and let's go now and see what faults there might be. And I don't see no faults, and now I see the controller over there and the hypervisors over there. How about that? One more thing I wanted to point out is that you go to vSwitch policy over here, and let's go ahead and enable LLDP over here. So this is basically saying on the hypervisor I'm enabling LLDP. Again, port channel policy, I don't care. If you were doing VPC, in that case obviously you would come here and you would say LSCP active. But I will not do that because I'm not doing LSCP active. Then I go ahead and hit submit and submit changes. Let's go ahead and look and see what it did over here. If you notice, it did a DVS SMFX AVE. That's the DVS name that will show up in vCenter. Let's take a look at the port groups. These are the uplink ports, and like you see, there is an infra port, there's an inside and outside. Those are the two important ports. The outside port is where your leaf uplinks will get connected. That's like your VM NIC. And then the inside is the promiscuous port where all those private VLANs, those are the promiscuous port for the private VLANs. Now let's go ahead and take a quick look from vCenter and see what this looks like. So let's go to networking, and as you can see, I should have SMFX AVE show up over here, and I open it up. Let's take a look at the outside port group, and let's go to summary, and on summary you can see that it shows up over there. The thing I wanted to show you was, if you go to configure, just to see, you shouldn't configure it from here, but just to see, and you go to policies, you're going to see that this is a promiscuous port and VLAN trunking, and if you notice 3967 came on the outside automatically. Okay, and then let's go take a look on the inside. On the inside you see that I have VLAN 200 to 299. Those are going to be also, this is also a promiscuous port, and this is basically a VLAN trunking. So these are going to be for your primary and secondary VLANs. Notice that the 50 to 55 range doesn't show up anywhere here. The reason for that being is that those don't ever go to the AVE. They bypass, they go to the hypervisor, but they bypass it. So anyway, that's all looking good. The next thing I want to do is to connect up my uplinks. So if you look at the diagram again, 25, ESXi 25 is VMNIC 3 and 26 is VMNIC 2. So then let's go over here and let's say add manage host, and we'll just add host and new host, and I'm going to choose both of them. Okay, and I'm going to say next. I don't care about moving the VM kernel. You might want to do that if you have only two uplinks and they're both used in band, and your management has to be in band for ESXi. But in this case, that's not the situation. So I'm going to say next, and then I'm going to choose on 25, it was VMNIC 3, if I remember right, and I'll say assign uplink, and I like to do auto assign over here. And then on the second one, it was VMNIC 2, and I'm going to say assign uplink, and I'll say auto assign over here, and I'll say okay, and I'll say next, and next, and finish. And I noticed that a couple of faults showed up, and then it says soaking clearing. So these are transitional faults that, because I just configured, they showed up, but they're going away. Now let's go back to vCenter and let's go to host and clusters very quickly, and let's do a little bit of checking very quickly. Let's go to 25, and on 25 let's go to virtual switches, and let's go to the virtual switch SMFX AVE, and here's the uplink it assigned. Let's click on this guy and let's click on LLDP because I enabled it from the vSwitch policy, if you remember, and I do see my neighbor to be Ethernet 123 on leaf 304. Okay, so all looks good. Let's make sure the other one looks good too. So we go over here, we go to virtual switches, we go to SMFX AVE, and over here it assign uplink 1, and we look at it, and we look at LLDP, and sure enough it's 303. So all that's looking. One more thing that we have to do is to set up the IP addresses for the AVE management. To do that, we need to go to networking, and we have to go to our DVS switch for AVE, and then you go to configure, and then you go to network protocol profiles, and you hit the plus button, and then you give it a name. Let's say IPv for pool for AVE, and then I say select networks, and in this case, to make it easy, I'm just going to go ahead and select the VM network over here. No, not that one, this one, the VM network, and then I'll say OK, and then I'll say next, and over here make sure next, then over here I choose the IP address. I put the IP address of the network, which is 10.29.198.0/24, and the mask is there 24, and then the gateway for that is 10.29.198.1. and I am not going to use DHCP here because I don't have DHCP set up. So I'm going to use static enable IP pool, static pool. So over here, I'm going to put 10.29.198.27 pound 2, which means that I have two addresses starting from 27. Since I have two hypervisors, 27 and 28 is what's going to get assigned to them when the AVE comes up. So let's go ahead and say finish, and that's it. We are pretty much done. Alright, we are almost done. We've configured the basic VMM domain. Now we have to use the vCenter plugin to install the AVE, and then we are done with the setup. Then we can be like users and map EPGs to the VMM domain and then connect VNICs to those port groups that pop up. Last minute addition. Due to people asking for this, we have included section 3. In section 3, we are going to demonstrate microsegmentation with AVE for both VXLAN based EPG and VLAN based EPG. Now, please move on to the next module of this training.